Okay, so welcome to episode 11 of Reading Tolkien podcast. Today I am with Sridhar again. So how are you going, Sridhar?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah, not too bad. Lots of work, but that's okay. And today, so we're going to do a couple of things. First, I'm going to go over just a little bit of news, and also I'm going to shill my Patreon, which I haven't done yet on the podcast, but I do have one. So I'm going to shill that, and then we're going to talk about Aldarion and Erendis again. So I must say, for those who have listened to the podcast, you'll know that this is the second time we've talked about this, although the first time, I think it was the first time I talked about it, may have been the second podcast, actually. But that was with Razib, who is my very occasional other co-host. I'm hoping to have him back soon to talk about the Akalabeth, the sort of downfall myth story. But today we're going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it with Sridhar because, of course, we haven't really talked about it yet. So we're going to have another look, and as I've said a few times, we will revisit certain texts, because a lot of this repays, multiple viewings, as it were, rereading. So today we're going to sort of do that with Aldarion and Erendis. Again, a very different story to The Hobbit, which we talked about last time, and before that, Children of Húrin. So we're getting around to a few of the lesser-known works. So before we get there, or before we go there, any updates on what else you've been reading, Sridhar? I know last time, actually, I can't remember what you said you were talking about last time. It was a biography of someone.
Of Da Vinci,
Bach?
yeah.
Right. Oh,
I was
right.
reading a biography of Da Vinci, yeah. I'm still working my way through that one.
Yeah.
It's quite long, but
Mm-hmm.
but I just finished reading a lovely little book called, I think, A Week at the Airport.
Oh, sounds quaint.
By sorry?
Sounds quaint, but good with quaint.
Yeah. It's by Alain de Botton, or Alain de Botton. I don't know I don't know if he prefers the French or the English pronunciation.
Yeah. I've read his book on architecture, which was okay.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that he had a book on architecture. I actually had never read anything else by him, though. He's kind of like a famous person, I think, right? Because it seems like I've seen him around. He's kind of like a public intellectual type.
Definitely, he's learned how to monetize being a public intellectual very effectively.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it. But it's just a charming book where I think when in Heathrow they were setting up Terminal 5. In the mid 2000s, they had him in to sort of spend a week there and just sort of write about it. It's quite short, but it's a pretty charming little book. The airport is really. I'm someone who loves airports, and I always think that they could be a place where you enjoy yourself and enjoy the leisure, and it's such a cultural hub for all of us, but most people sort of rush through it and are anxiety ridden. So I loved it because I love airports, but if you don't like airports, maybe it's a bit bland.
I don't hate them. I mean, I feel, I don't know, I feel a strange sense of calm when I'm at an airport. I don't know why that is, despite all the busyness. I have a funny story, actually. Well, I don't know if it's funny, but the first time I went to Heathrow, actually, I hadn't been, obviously, it was the first time I was there, so I didn't know really, about how to navigate it. And coming from here, our airport, it's fairly large, but obviously not as large as Heathrow. And I was trying to navigate around to my my bus, because I was getting a bus that I'd organised to go sort of away from London for a time, and straight from the airport. And so I was trying to navigate around, and I was like, how do I walk around here? And I didn't actually realise that you could catch, or at least I didn't at first realise that you could actually catch like the tube to the different part of the airport. I was like, I sort of had no conception of that, because now airport here, it's, as I said, it's it's a large airport, but it doesn't have a train that goes from one part of it to another.
Right.
It doesn't
Right.
need quite that. So Heathrow, yeah, that was, and then finally I worked it out, and I worked out that, oh yes, I have to catch the underground. So, so I was a bit embarrassed, but now
No,
now it's second nature. But yeah.
Yeah, airports. I have a friend who always talks about how airports are idiot proof, but I really don't think that's the case. I think if you don't read the signs, you can easily be far more than an idiot and still have some trouble navigating yourself.
Yeah. Well, as I said, yeah, that was a bit silly, but that's really the only time that's happened, thankfully. So, at other airports, I've been all right, but yeah, I don't mind airports. I do have a bit of a fear of flying, though. So it's when I get on the plane that I start getting nervous. But
well, that's what the airport bar is for.
Well, that's why I'm usually there.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, anyway, even though I've flown, well, and from Australia, of course, unless you want to go to Asia, everywhere else, it's a very long flight. So, it's not like I've not flown quite a lot by now, but it's just I don't know. The more I fly, the more anxious I seem to get. It's weird. You would think it'd go the other way around, but
yeah.
Anyway, yeah. I need to go.
I love flying. I think it's
Yeah.
I would much rather get in a plane than a car any day. I always get a little bit anxious when I get in an automobile because it's so much less safe.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Look, this is just my. It's just my. I don't know,
your personal anxiety, or your personal neurosis about plane. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a reasoned. It's not a reasoned kind of worry that I have, but
yeah.
The horrible thing is I haven't been flying for a while now, of course, because of COVID. But I'm hoping to go back to New Zealand or something soon, because we've opened up with them. So,
oh, cool.
maybe I'll be able to fly over there.
Yeah, all you COVID-free countries are opening up together, huh?
Yes.
Having all the fun without us.
That's too, because we're close enough, and we can it's close enough, similar enough that it's not too onerous. Flying to the US or something that might be different, but
indeed,
who knows when that flight those flights will open again. But I'll have to come and visit when they do.
Oh yeah, that would be great. You should do a US tour. Yeah,
no, definitely. I mean, yeah, no, we'll see in 5 years' time once we're allowed. Hopefully it won't be that long. But anyway. But yeah, so no, that sounds like a good book. Yeah, to get back to that.
Yeah.
Great little thing.
What about you? Any books on your docket?
Well, I've been reading the book I mentioned, I think, last time, Tolkien's Modern Reading by Holly Ordway, who I'll be interviewing at the end of this month. So this is a pretty interesting book. I think it's fairly significant, for those who are interested in Tolkien studies. So we'll be having a talk about that. And I'm sure that will go nicely. And Holly's, the author, has already done a whole bunch of other podcasts. So for those who are interested, you can look her up. But I'm going to try and ask some different questions. So, hopefully it won't be too much of a repeat of some of the podcasts that she's already done. But yeah, so that should be a fun discussion. Nice. And apart from that, not a whole lot else, to be honest. I've just been a bit busy with work, so reading's been a bit, a bit on the back burner, as it were. But I've got several piles of books, of course. So, one day I'll get through that. But so I guess before we get into Aldarion and Erendis, as I said, there is a bit of news about the Amazon show. it's not really news. It's something we sort of already knew, but it's just I guess it's clarifying the situation, and it's going to cost apparently $465 million for the first season, which is apparently far and away the most expensive. And that's in US dollars. So, it's the most expensive show ever made by quite a mile. So, it's going to be very interesting. The set everything should look, at the very least, amazing. Set design, costume, any CGI should be seamless. I mean, if they're pumping those kinds of resources into it. I saw Lord of the Rings was trending on Twitter for a little while because of this news, and there was a couple of there were a couple of people going, "Oh, they could have put that money into coronavirus vaccines," and blah blah blah. I don't know if they quite know how the economy works, but it'll be interesting anyway to see how this all goes. And hopefully,
I love that the coronavirus vaccine is a thing that they a thing that they go to.
Well, that's the latest.
Of all the problems, if we're even going to have this argument of all the problems of the world to solve, the COVID vaccine that we already have is one of them.
We have it, yeah. Although not here, because our government is stupid and didn't buy the right kind of vaccines. But anyway, but there's no COVID here anyway, so it's okay. But
you don't even need it. Yeah, your vaccine is good health sense.
I think we're getting the Pfizer ones now, but we don't have because we were manufacturing the AstraZeneca ones, but that's the blood clot thing, so I don't think they're giving it to people under 50 now.
Oh boy!
So I don't know. I'm not sure.
I was scheduled to get the Johnson & Johnson on Thursday, a couple days ago, but they canceled it in the US. Yeah,
canceled it
for the same kind of blood clot situation, which is a bummer. But
so you're not vaccinated at the moment?
I'm not, but I'm scheduled for my first dose of Pfizer actually on this next Thursday. So I'm really just dreading the fact that I have to go in twice now. I was really looking forward to the one and done Johnson & Johnson, but now I have to put 2 dates on my calendar, which is infuriating. I know to the people listening, if someone's pulling their hair out because this is the ultimate first world complaint. I'm aware of how this sounds.
I mean, it is frustrating, but at least you have access to it because now, of course, they've ordered a whole bunch of the Pfizer ones for here, but that's going to take more time now because we didn't order it, previously. So it's all a big bungle up. Anyway,
that's frustrating.
Don't get me started on the awful conservative government that we have at the moment. So
what do you think about this? Are you optimistic with this huge budget, or are you kind of dreading, that this will be sort of overproduced and over?
I think I prefer that they have a lot of money to make this than not. So it's good that they have
fair enough
money. As to the ethical, I don't know. I felt a bit funny about this because Amazon is just a terrible company for workers and employees. So I'm like, I feel somewhat ethically torn about supporting Amazon in this endeavor because on the one hand, I want to see an adaptation of the Second Age material because a lot of it's amazing. But on the other hand, I'm sort of, I don't know if I really want to support. I mean, this is a problem with a lot of these big companies, of course, and Apple's, the way that they make iPhones and all of this is well known. The kind of corners they cut in terms of workers, looking after workers and whatever. So, I'm not sure what to think about it ethically because, go on.
I think with cases like these, it's kind of goes hand in hand with capitalism. It's just with the way that we have the world set up right now. Like this kind of situation is unavoidable. And I think if you sort of, within reason, if you are always sort of doubting the ethics of something like supporting a show on Amazon, then you'll end up living quite a barren life. So I think that there can be sort of two planes of existence. One where you just sort of live your life and try to enjoy it, and another where you actually by voting or doing other kinds of sort of grassroots activism, try to actually enact some systems level change, for which you really need groups of people. You need groups of people acting together to have any real change. The actions of any individual in something like supporting Amazon or not is really not going to change the situation. So I think, you can have like this is not to say that you can just sort of sit on your ass and eat popcorn and not care for the world. Though of course you could do that too. And that's not my business. But my point is, I wouldn't feel too torn about it. You do have to enjoy your life at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, this is true. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to watch it, so whatever.
Yeah, that's going to happen, and we can deal with the rest later.
I think I'm definitely trying to use Amazon less as like a to buy books and I don't know materials or things that I need. So if I at least can do that. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be. I mean, it has a good creative team behind it. So yeah, I mean, there's not much more we can say. I really hope they start doing some sort of publicity soon, so we have something to go on in terms of the design, the aesthetic, the look. That's what I'm really looking forward to seeing. Because
same.
What I really don't want them to do is just slavishly copy the kind of aesthetics of the movies. I think that would be a disaster because they really box themselves in. They may do that a little bit, but my feeling is that as the show goes on, that will happen less and less, and we'll start to see more sort of unique designs. But I don't know, that's just an opinion, a feeling that I have. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with. But really, that's so far the only news. But it's
speaking of $465 million, you said you had a Patreon.
Oh yes. Can some of that money come to me, please? On the Patreon. Yes, it's just it's at patreon.com/readingtolkienpod, all one phrase. And for those who are interested, we will eventually do some patron only episodes once we get a few patrons, and that money will be will go towards sort of maintaining the podcast on Libsyn, and so where it's hosted, and then also materials like better mics, which I need. So once we have a bit of money there, I'll get a better mic, and hopefully I'll sound better. So and for those who contribute, there'll be extra episodes at first, and then we might do some. Well, who knows in the future, but we might do some merch or something if that ever if it ever comes to that. So please support us there if you can, and there will be some exclusive episodes for you there in a bit. And so is there anything else you wanted to say before we, I guess, got into the discussion today?
I think that just about covers it. We can get stuck in Aldarion and Erendis now.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Yeah, so this story, as those who would have heard the first episode know, this story is from Unfinished Tales, or it's published in that volume. And it sort of is one of the few stories that deals with the Second Age stuff, sort of Numenor stuff. And it's sort of I don't know how you would characterize it, almost as a domestic drama, at least in part.
Yeah.
And obviously befitting its place of publication, it is unfortunately incomplete. It was not finished, which is, I think, a big loss. But in any case, it's something different, something quite distinct from Tolkien's pen, and so we're just going to, as I said, reconsider some of its ideas, some of its themes today. So I don't know. I guess to begin with, what did you think about the story? Just in a general sense.
I liked it.
Yep. Cool.
I liked it. I thought it was it's pretty solid. This guy really knew how to write.
Yeah.
No, I thought it was interesting in that really not a lot happens. It's I think a lot of the I think we can sort of do the synopsis in like a couple of sentences, really, if we wanted to. But I think that the sort of most of the meat of the story and the charm of it comes in the way that he sort of paints these characters, and sort of paints their ideas and even just sort of like their like some monologues. There are a couple of monologues in here that are really quite nice. And almost poetically written. So, I'm not sure how often he dipped into this kind of writing, but outside of the major works, like I'm not actually super well versed with the rest of the unfinished tales, but it seems quite a different tone than the Children of Hurin, and certainly the Hobbit, and even the Lord of the Rings, really.
Yeah, I think this, along with Children of Hurin and several other texts, was sort of written after Lord of the Rings, and I feel like by that time, so in the 50s and 60s, I feel like at that time he'd really developed quite a distinct voice, and obviously aided by writing the Lord of the Rings, enormous kind of novel that it is, and I think we see some of the some of the best of that kind of writing in Children of Hurin and also here. I think there are some similarities actually between this, not the stories per se, but the writing style. It's kind of terse. It's kind of very I don't know how to explain it, but it's not as languid as the Lord of the Rings. There's less descriptive there are fewer descriptive passages, just in a general sense. But at the same time, as in the Children of Hurin, I think a lot of emotion is communicated as you say, through the sort of monologue, through dialogue, and through sort of very terse description. But at the same time, it's not archaizing like his early material was. It does, as in the Lord of the Rings, there is some use of sort of archaism, but not a whole lot. He deploys it very sort of carefully, so I don't know if you'd agree with that or what you'd feel about that, but I feel like he just develops this this style sort of after writing Lord of the Rings, a less languid style, which he would sort of write some of these first and second age stories in.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point that you brought up about it's really fine the way that it's really subtle the way that he uses the archaism. It almost seems like it almost seems cinematic. The way that it seems like like he dips into that tone at a moment where the story kind of modulates to another scene, and it kind of gives a rhythm to it. It gives it sort of like a beat, and I can sort of see the scenes kind of changing as his sort of tone goes in and out of various styles. So I think in terms of the the modulations maybe is the best way to put it. I think it's really wonderfully done. And it's interesting. I didn't realize that he wrote this, so I didn't realize that this was a later work, but that makes sense. I think Martin Amis somewhere says that the talent of the young writer is the talent of a snappy sentence or turn of phrase, but that might sort of dwindle with time. But the skill that one gains as a writer is in the modulations. The way that Dickensian, the way that in Dickens, characters, they move through the city, and you can actually, there's a beat to the way that they move. I think a less experienced writer would have that be more choppy. And I think it's a similar thing here. There's a sort of scope to this to Aldarion and Erendis, but you feel safe in Tolkien's hand because there's just a beat, and he knows how to change the tone of his voice. I don't know if you have anything to go on that.
I mean, I agree with that. I don't know if Tolkien ever wrote snappy sentences, but
I think there are a few in The Hobbit.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but
not quite he's not quite as snappy as Martin Amis for sure.
No, Martin. Yeah, that's a very distinct kind of I just wanted to read a passage which is quite nice. My edition, which is HarperCollins, it's on page 226. And I think this is just when he is coming back from his first voyage. So we should say that, of course, this is about, as I said, sort of set in Numenor. The sort of records the relationship of Aldarion, who is the Prince of Numenor, a Prince of Numenor, and also Erendis, his sort of love interest. And he is, the heart of the story is that each of these people, thanks to having been born in Numenor, are blessed with long lives, and they have this sort of very very long courtship, and things begin to strain when Aldarion repeatedly goes out to Middle Earth on voyages. So he's a ship captain, and of course, Erendis is left at home, and she sort of has some choice words to say about Aldarion's, his escapades. So the book is not really about Aldarion's adventure. What I like about it is it's not about his adventure at all. It's really about the effect of his absence, more than anything else. So, it's as though in the Lord of the Rings, Tolkien wrote a novel about the effect of Sam's absence on Rosie Cotton or something. So it takes the route of not following, and it doesn't follow Aldarion on his adventures, right? When he goes over the sea, it's sort of, we get some very brief descriptions of what he does, but we don't sort of follow him there, which is important. We always stay on Numenor. So anyway, he's returning from his first voyage in this passage.
Are you speaking of his first voyage with his grandfather? Is that who that is? Or his first voyage solo?
I think it's his first solo voyage, I think.
Okay, I'm just trying to find it myself so I can follow along. But
it's like on the fourth page on my edition.
Okay, cool.
Sounds like someone's being naughty in Minnesota, or no, you're not in Minnesota. I keep getting that wrong.
In Wisconsin? Yeah, Wisconsin. I think technically we're still not allowed to have parties, but the weather's getting nicer and it's Friday night, and I live in like a college town, so I think the police is going to go bust up some COVID parties.
I don't know if that'll pick up, but there was a siren in the background for listeners. I don't know, but anyway, it's talking about how Aldarion returns. So there was joy in Romana, which is one of the port cities in Numenor, and Armenelos, When men saw the great ship Numerama, oh my God, Numerama, yes, which signifies west wings. I like that. Coming up from the sea, her golden sails reddened in the sunset. The summer was nearly over, and the Eruhuntale, which is a festival, was nigh. It seemed to Menelda that he welcomed his son in the house of Vianta, that he had grown in when he welcomed his son in the house of Vianta, that he had grown in stature, and his eyes were brighter, but they looked far away. What did you see, Onya, which is, I don't know, the Numenorian word for son, I guess, in your far journeys, that now lives most in memory? But Aldarion, looking east towards the night, was silent. At last he answered, but softly, as one that speaks to himself, the fair people of the elves, the green shores, the mountains wreathed in cloud, the regions of mist and shadow beyond guess, I do not know. He ceased, and Menelda knew that he had not spoken his full mind, for Aldarion had become enamoured of the great sea and of a ship riding there alone without sight of land, borne by the winds and foam at its throat, to coasts and havens unguessed, and that love and desire never left him until his life's end. I know, I just love that little that passage there.
I loved it too. I actually underlined that passage as well. So yeah,
it just really captures.
It's really nicely written.
It captures sort of both. I don't know, Eldarion's sort of so-called sea longing, which Tolkien talks about himself sort of having, that sense of wanting to, I don't know, somehow escape to the sort of the. I guess it's that same sense that Moby Dick, produces when you read that, or hints at that sense that the sea is this sort of magnificent and sort of untamed wilderness, but that sort of that there are spiritual depths there in addition to the depths itself. But there's something also kind of slightly frightening, I guess, about the sea. But that almost the sense that once you have experienced that, the life on the land, it seems almost somehow to fade into or diminish, in importance and sort of. So I don't know. I think for me that captures that feeling there, and then of course, and it does that. It does that without having to sort of narrate Aldarion, as I've said, going on this journey, right? So again, we stay in Numenor all the time. We're always there in this story, which is interesting. But the sea is still this character in the book, even though we're never sort of directly there.
Yeah, he says not I think just a couple of pages after that. What does he say here? It's when I think he's wanted to go on another journey, and it says here, then Almarion said to him, "Must you depart again, Aldarion, my son? Is there nothing that will hold you in the fairest of all mortal lands?" "Not yet," he answered, "but there are fairer things in Armenelos than a man could find elsewhere, even in the lands of the Eldar. But mariners are men of two minds, at war with themselves, and the desire of the sea still holds me." I also really like that. But yeah, I think that also kind of it's a nice poetic way of putting his sea longing, in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then of course when he returns to Numenor, he lives on an island in the bay of Romana, this city, so he he doesn't even sort of even when he returns, he has one foot, as it were, in the sea.
I didn't quite is that basically like a yacht that he's got going on there? What is that situation?
What does it say? Yeah, it's.
I mean, obviously it's not a yacht. This is Numenor, not like Orange County or whatever. But
at that time, he, having no mind to live upon land in Armenelos, that's the royal city, had a ship built that should serve as his dwelling place. He named it therefore Iambar, which presumably means something. And at times he would sail to it in it. From haven to haven of Numenor. For the most part, it lay an anchor of Tol Uinen. That is an island, and that was a little isle in the bay of Romana that was set there by Uinen, the Lady of the Seas. sort of a sea goddess. Upon Iamba was a guild house of the venturers, and there were kept the records of their great voyages. For Tarman Elder looked coldly on the enterprises of his son and cared not to hear the tales of his journeys, believing that he sowed the seeds of restlessness and the desire of other lands to hold. And we'll come to that in a minute too. This whole issue of sort of imperialism in the story. So yeah, I think it nicely captures Eldarion's sort of personality there, and then of course we also have Erendis, who we meet a bit later in the story. But she has her own character, and I think what's interesting about this story is that it really doesn't take sides, right? At least to my mind. I don't know, did you feel like it was fairly even-handed when it comes to these two characters, the two major characters?
I think so. I think I would agree with that. I think Aldarion is, he's a bit scathing about her at times. I'm not sure that the prose is sort of reflexively critical of him, the way that say when Humbert is horrible in Lolita, Nabokov is horrible to Humbert. I'm not sure that I got the same kind of disdain for Aldarion from Tolkien, but I could be wrong about that. On the whole, I think it's fairly even-handed, though. Yeah,
for sure. Because I guess the book doesn't really, or the story doesn't really intersect very much, of course, with the larger legendarium, although it does, because we learn later that Aldarion is sort of establishing a relationship with the elves, and that that's going to be the basis of the alliance in which Sauron is fought. But I think what the story also says, as I've sort of gestured towards, is that there is that going on, but there's also as that extract just I just read sort of hints at. There's also this sense that Aldarion is sort of preparing the way for Númenórean expansion, right? Sort of imperial expansion. And I think that's a big, it's a sort of you might say, a secondary theme of this work. Because, of course, why does Aldarion want to go to Middle-earth? In part, it's in order to obtain resources, that mainly wood, right, for his ships and fleets and stuff. And this is eventually a major reason for why Sauron is able to gain alliance with a lot of the humans who live in Middle-earth, right? It is in part because of Númenórean imperialism. So, which starts here. So there's a kind of ambiguity about Eldarion's political motives, not domestically, but like in a sort of foreign policy sense. That's also kind of interesting. Makes the sort of moral dichotomy of Lord of the Rings more interesting in retrospect, perhaps. Even though that book is so sort of, that book is so distant from this point in time that we don't really have that sense of things. But yeah, anyway, there's a lot there.
No, I think that's a good point, and I want to sort of half correct what I just said, which is that I don't really feel Tolkien having that much sympathy for Erendis over Aldarion, but I think Tolkien is quite reflexively critical of Aldarion's politics, I guess, if you will. Like one phrase, or not phrase, but one part really stuck out. It's when Aldarion is sort of becoming estranged from his father, and it says the ships of the Númenóreans became ever larger and of greater draught or draft in those days. I don't know actually how you say that word. Until they could make. Okay, yeah.
I think,
fair enough. Until they could make far voyages carrying many men and great cargoes. And Aldarion was often long gone from Númenor. Tar Meneldor ever opposed his son, and he set a curb on the felling of trees in Numenor for the building of vessels. And it came therefore into Eldarion's mind that he would find timber in Middle Earth and seek there for a haven for the repair of his ships. In his voyages down the coast, he looked with wonder on the great forests, and at the mouth of the river that the Numenorians called Gwathir, River of Shadow, he established Vignalond. I don't know how you would say that. The new haven.
Vignalonde.
Vignalonde. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of the, like you said, the beginning of this sort of imperial instinct. But to me, it sounds like Tolkien is painting him almost like a Saruman-esque figure. Kind of the industry, the mind of metal and wheels, or whatever it is. Kind of
That's an
not quite that extreme, but yeah, I don't know if that's valid, but it's not quite as extreme. But it seems it seems like Tolkien is definitely critical of his politics here.
By the way, if you've ever been to New Haven, Connecticut, that is the translation of Vignalonde. So you can always say, "I've been to Vignalonde."
Yeah.
Actually, there's a tiny town here called New Haven too, but it's like a little village, so it's not really, doesn't really count. But but yeah.
I should start. Anytime, isn't that where Yale is, or am I wrong? Anytime I meet someone who goes to Yale, I should just say, "Oh, do you live in Vignalonde?"
It is. I think Yale. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
But anyway, just a random bit of trivia.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's right. And so that's, this is the first of the Numenorian sort of settlements in Middle-earth. And then, as we go through the history, we find out that, of course, eventually many of the cities in Gondor, for example, were founded during that sort of period of expansion. And really the late Second Age is like the story of it's not at all this, and I hope the show captures this, but the late Second Age is kind of not at all this this story about the fight between Sauron and the beleaguered good people of Middle-earth. It's really a story about the two slave empires, Sauron's empire and then Numenor, sort of battling it out, which, could make for a fascinating end to the show. But so we see here the seeds of, as you say, the Saruman-esque kind of seeds of the downfall of Numenor, at least in the sense that it's moral downfall, right? As they begin to spread into Middle-earth and start extracting resources and whatever. But I think you're right that it to note Saruman there, because of course with the forests and the cutting down of forests, we do see. We see a sort of recapitulation of that ecological theme, if you like, as we see it in of course, the Lord of the Rings as well, and we see it again here, as but also like contextualized as a kind of outcome of like imperial policy. So I think that's what makes it interesting here.
Yeah,
at least for me.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, while we're on this kick of reading, I think, one of my favorite parts was right at the end when Aldarion's father, after he receives the note from Gil-galad, which I don't know if you want to talk about that, but before we get to this part, but,
that's right. We can talk about that later, yeah, or after, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So he's quite conflicted. Aldarion's father, and he has a bit of a monologue, and there's a part that I really liked in it, where he says, "Yet if the world grows again dark, the lords must know, and they have sent me no sign, unless this be the sign. What's that? Our fathers were rewarded for the aid they gave in the defeat of the great shadow. Shall their sons stand aloof if evil finds a new head?" And then the part that I really liked is, "I am in too great doubt to rule, to prepare or to let be. to prepare for war, which is yet only guessed, train craftsmen and tillers in the midst of peace for blood spilling and battle, put iron in the hands of greedy captains who will love only conquest, and count the slain as their glory? Will they say to Eru, at least your enemies were amongst them? Or to fold hands while friends die unjustly, let men live in blind peace until the ravisher is at the gate? What then will they do? Match naked hands against iron and die in vain, or flee, leaving the cries of women behind them? Will they say to Eru, at least I spilled no blood? When either way may lead to evil, of what worth is choice? And I think that kind of sums up the conflict, which I think it's a legitimate one. He's not outright critical of it, but I don't know. What are your thoughts? What do you think? What do you think of the ethics here?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, what's interesting about Menelder, of course, is that he abdicates so that Aldarion can sort of, bring Numenor, I guess, into the politics of Middle Earth, because he recognizes himself that Numenor, it's sort of inevitable that Numenor can't remain this island paradise such as it is, even though that seems to have been the intention in the story, right? That somehow the Numenorians would sort of live with a sense of what's the word? I don't know. With a sense of completeness or satisfaction, sort of keeping to their island. But so this is, I suppose, what Menelder is talking about. This sense. So it's interesting that he abdicates and sort of acknowledges defeat in a sense, right? He sort of acknowledges that, well, I can't do this. I'm not. I don't have the acumen to for politics, basically, and Aldarion, who's being. So it's a kind of tragic, it's a bit of a tragic development because, on the one hand, as we've said, Aldarion is sort of this figure who has this longing for the open spaces of the sea, for but he's also drawn into the politics of Middle Earth, and not entirely against his will or anything. He establishes this haven. He starts cutting down forests. This produces some conflict with the natives, as it were. There's a kind of heart of darkness thing going on there. The great forests of Middle Earth cutting. So I don't know. That's it's interesting how this one little story, which is unfinished, really delves into the psychology of that early development of the sort of imperialism in a political way, but also like through these personalities. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and it's almost like through Menelder's tragedy, I guess, his personal tragedy. It is almost like a story of, for lack of a better phrase, it's a story of the birth of politics, or at least the sort of awareness of politics thrust onto someone, because I think that the thing to take away from this is really that, which I don't know if Tolkien would agree with this, but my takeaway is that to sort of abstain from politics is actually a political decision, and if you want to sort of live this life where you're totally peaceful and whole, that's a fairyland, and it's a land that's not really going to exist, and the people that we need at the helm are people who are capable of making tough decisions. It's kind of a cliche, but I think that's why he, like you said, that's why he abdicates. It's almost like he realizes that even though he's like the old wise king, he's almost like especially in the beginning, the characterization of him right at the top of the story I thought was actually quite beautiful. Of him as a sort of a gentleman who's sort of happy to look, at these stars and consider the origins of the world or something like that. He seems like a philosopher king. He seems someone who's fit for peacetime, but not actually not actually a political leader. The way that a philosopher king can't be. So there's a real hardness.
Jeez, what's going on back there?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I guess it's just. I mean, I guess people are just partying like crazy around here.
Lots of parties, lots of police shutting down parties. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Who would have thought that Wisconsin is party central? But it certainly sounds like it to me. But there's a real sort of it's almost a jaded look at the world. Like the imperials may suck, but at least they're doing something.
Yeah, I guess so. Just to go back to the Amazon show just for a second, I found a tweet by William Babiani. I don't know who he is, but some sort of film critic. So I don't know, whatever. But he's going on about. He has a tweet about the Amazon show. It says, so he says, 465 million, as I said. Gosh, there's a lot of sirens there. He says,
sorry about that.
No, that's right. He says, these aren't fun facts. Amazon could be spending this money on their mistreated workers instead. I'm seeing this a lot on Twitter. I don't know. There seems to be a bit of virtue signaling going on about this. So I'm not quite sure why suddenly now people are like, oh, for this show in particular, we shouldn't spend money on it.
I mean, that's just, it's insane. I mean, look, I don't actually believe this, but what if, I think an argument could be made that the only way forward as a species is to become spacefaring. And the two people that seem both interested and capable of doing that for us right now are Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Even if in the short run he's mistreating his workers, maybe this $465 million, to get them more money, to keep the Amazon, churning, the Amazon machine churning, will eventually be the thing that gets us, a multi-planetary species.
Maybe.
I mean, I'm saying,
I'm not sure about the ethical calculations there, but yeah, maybe.
There's definitely some Numenorian vibes coming from that. But
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's a weird sentiment, isn't it? Like, I don't know why for this show. I guess because it's expensive and people are like, well, and Amazon, as I said before, has this, doesn't. I mean, it's true that it doesn't treat workers as it should, with dignity. So this is a shitty situation, but I'm not sure the way to address it is to say, well, they shouldn't make this show or they should pay less of this. I don't know. Yeah.
It's just it's a total non sequitur. Just there are other ways to the way to force Amazon to treat its workers better is through, again, it's effective group lobbying and the sort of unsexy work of politics. The tweeting about, complaining about, or the stopping of one show, which $465 million, it's a lot of money, but it's not really in the broad scheme of things. So
I'm sure Amazon could pay
it's not really
more and do the show at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's probably what we should be asking for.
I think it must just be because the show is so visible and it's a lot of money. It's more money than any other show, and maybe people are
easy target. It's an easy sort of virtue signal target, right?
Exactly.
You signal your sort of, I don't know, woke cred or whatever by going after the money.
Exactly.
I just, I don't know. The psychology of Twitter is disgusting. I hate it. All these fucking so-called virtuous people, and they probably don't do a cent or give a shit about, the rights of workers in their normal lives, but whatever.
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah.
I don't know why I'm so angry.
We could do a whole separate podcast on the cesspool that is Twitter.
Yeah. Oh my god. Especially film critics. Like, what the fuck? What have you ever done?
I know. Yeah. Yeah, it's like this film critic that no one has ever heard of. They're like, all right, cool,
Well,
dude.
I don't know. Maybe he's famous. I have no idea. But yeah, it's just
All
it's just,
right, fair enough.
frustrating. I mean, I don't know. Maybe not. Yeah. But yeah, it just seems to me an easy and an easy target. I don't know.
It seems to me, and this will be the last thing I say on this.
Yeah.
If you are any sort of artist or artist adjacent person, like a filmmaker or a film critic or a musician or whatever, I think you have basically relinquished your rights to sort of complain about the way that money is being spent on things in society, because the arts are a kind of necessary, I would say necessary, but definite suck on the public resource.
Perhaps,
we can argue about the merits of what you gain from that, but I'm not sure that a film critic is the best person to be saying, maybe $465 million could be spent elsewhere. And
also, like, again, I want to reiterate.
That's why you have a job, bro.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, again, I no, you're right. Again, I agree with the sentiment that Amazon should treat its workers better. I'm just saying that they can afford to do both. Like, the answer to Amazon's workers being treated better is not to like cancel or halve the budget of a show. It's to make Amazon like, I don't know. It's to incentivize Amazon to treat its workers better somehow. I don't know how to do that, but
right.
You're not going to do that by complaining about the money spent on one particular show. I mean, yeah, it's a problem.
If they just lower the funding for the Amazon show, then we're going to have workers who are treated shittily, and we're going to have a bunch of people who are pissed off because the show was a piece of shit. Like, it's not going to solve the other problem,
No, yeah.
You're adding another thing. Anyway,
sorry,
let's get back to the.
I am. Don't worry, I am a democratic socialist. Everyone, I hate. Yeah. I mean, as I said, as a corporation,
to show us your tax returns.
Yeah. Oh God, I know. Yeah. So sorry about that little. I just saw that on Twitter. I was like, this is stupid. Why is this narrative developing? This is ridiculous. Anyway, like, I agree with the sentiment in part, but but at the same time, I'm like virtue signaling about this show is not going to help anyone.
Yeah.
Anyway, God, ridiculous. And the other thing I'm seeing, sorry to keep going, is that nobody wants this show, or this is going to be a big flop, blah blah blah. What do you think about that? I mean, I don't know. Do you think this is going to be a huge flop? Actually,
I don't know. I think I'm cautiously optimistic about it. I haven't actually looked into sort of who's like running it and who's involved and stuff, but I think people just have a bad taste in their mouths from The Hobbit, as we talked extensively about last time.
Yeah.
But I think I kind of get the sense that they're going to move. I think they knew that kind of sucked, and I think it's a different team. I think, and they're gonna hopefully just start a whole different thing. And I think I said, I forget if we talked about this on the podcast or if this was just when we were chatting, but I think if the success of the Lord of the Rings as a sort of cinematic enterprise is going to happen, it's gonna sort of take the form of kind of the Sherlock Holmes canon, or that kind of universe, where where we have a bunch of different people sort of having their different takes on it, and some will be good and some will be bad, but hopefully there's the sort of style, like the sort of cinematic look of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. Hopefully that is discarded sooner rather than later, like you said. I think as long as they do that, it'll be a success, because it doesn't matter how this particular show will be. I think what matters is that this show is set as a sort of new baseline for, like, we're not like doing the thing that the movies did anymore. We're now starting a whole different thing where, like, we can have a different a different like take on Lord of the Rings, and the whole Middle Earth stuff. And as long as it does that, I think long run, that's it. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my feeling about the zeitgeist is that Game of Thrones is sort of dead in the water and Lord of the Rings is back. I don't know, that's just my sense of things. Like Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones stands for a while were like, this is the new Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is stupid and dumb and blah, blah, blah. This is the new sophisticated blah, 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 blah.
But the people who said that only watched the Lord of the Rings movies,
Well, yeah.
I think. But maybe not. Sorry, but
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what were you saying?
No. Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I was just saying that, yeah, I think that I feel like that moment has gone, and I feel like Tolkien is bad. Like, there's a lot of people on, like, YouTube, and, like, I don't know, I just, anecdotally, I feel like that's in the zeitgeist, whereas I feel like other fantasy shows, like The Witcher, yeah, it's kind of there. People are kind of interested in it. Game of Thrones prequels that are coming out, I haven't seen much enthusiasm at all for those. I mean, I think the Lord of the Rings show, if this show is actually good, it could be huge. I don't see why it would be a flop. I mean, I suspect a lot of people saying that don't actually realize this is not an adaptation of the novel. It's it's an imaginative adaptation's not quite the right word. It's an imaginative retelling or telling of the Second Age story, like the forging of the rings and stuff, and so it's going to be something quite new and distinct, I think. And if it's good, I don't see why it could be huge. I think, it's certainly going to look amazing. I feel probably will blow us away in that sense. And if it's written anything like Breaking Bad, like that quality, then I don't see why it wouldn't be good.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be well.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
And good stuff lasts even if other things sort of come in, more faddish things come in and become more sort of popular in the moment. I think, obviously, I really don't think that I haven't read the Game of Thrones, so I don't know, but from the little that I know about it, it seems very. Sorry.
Yeah. Wouldn't bother, to be honest. It's my own.
Yeah. I never got the sense that there's very much substance there in terms of the kind of things that we can discuss with the Middle Earth stuff. In terms of ethics or like we were just doing. Before we got on this tangent, politics or imperialism. I don't know. I'm sure there's something there in Game of Thrones as well, but I doubt that there's an entire field of study of scholarship around it, the way that there is around Tolkien.
Probably is, but
if there is, I must be wearing orthopedic shoes because I stand corrected. But
but yeah, no. Look, anyway, sorry for this huge diversion, but I guess it's worth talking about because it's an interesting. It's this. It's starting to. It's starting to sort of peek through into popular culture, into the popular consciousness, like on Twitter, sort of. And I don't know, I'm curious as to why it gets this negative reaction. I think anything involving corporations and lots of money, and if it's really obvious, like if it's something culturally salient, then it can receive a sort of a negative response. But anyway, we'll see what happens.
I also think
yeah, go on.
Sorry, just I know I said this before, but seriously, one last thing, and then I'll stop. But I also think that there's a general sense in the culture right now where any sort of artistic enterprise that gets talked about or like sort of comes up to the that kind of bubbles up to the surface. If it doesn't have some sort of express or obvious sort of social betterment angle, I think the immediate reaction, at least on Twitter, I don't know about the real world. I get the sense that it's not like this at all in real life, but on Twitter, the immediate sense is a kind of negative reaction. Is the kind of, why do we need to do this? I saw something like this cropping up when it was announced that Ralph Fiennes was going to do an adaptation of T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets, which I love.
Okay. Yeah.
I saw a similar kind of, what exactly is the point of this in terms of the social betterment angle, which is a fair question. My response as an artist is that there doesn't need to be a point to this. It's beautiful, and that's all that matters. But some people might disagree with that, and I think those people sort of tend to congregate on Twitter, which is why I think whenever something like this comes up, again with no obvious social reason to do it, except for that it's going to be like cool. I think people are kind of resentful of it a little bit on Twitter, and it makes Twitter a horrible place to be. If you're someone who cares about art and beauty.
Yeah, it's. I guess we've always lived in a world really when people want to co-opt art for their own propagandistic purposes. I mean, there's nothing new in that, I guess. But there definitely is. There definitely is. I don't know if that's what's quite behind this little, spat that some film critics seem to have, but yeah, in any case. So apologies, listeners. I hope that was mildly interesting as a sort of a diversion. But it's interesting because, they're not necessarily going to be adopting this particular story. But as we see from this story, I think there's a lot of thematic and sort of writerly interest that can be gleaned from this period, because really, as I said before, we have two major antagonistic, empires, the Numenorians and then Sauron's sort of empire, and that's sort of what comes to frame the whole Second Age in the end. And this is sort of the beginning of that, but we're seeing it through a personal story, which I think is very interesting. And I think, had Tolkien lived longer, I feel that he might have gone down the way of fleshing out a lot of Second Age stuff in stories like this. Unfortunately, he was not a Numenorian, so he was not blessed with long life. But I think it's worth a story like this is worth considering. So, I think it does have a connection with the TV series because obviously that's in part at least what it's going to be about. So it'll be interesting to see how they adapt that that theme. That is the sort of the the development of Numenorian power and imperialism and whatnot. I think that'll be really important for the show. So anyway,
yeah, for sure.
But I guess we've talked a bit about the story, but and you read that lovely passage where Menelda sort of has that debate with himself, as it were, and then gives up. But of course, we also have Erendis, who I've mentioned, and I don't know what was your take on her character, if indeed you have a take.
A hot take.
I quite like her. A hot take. Yeah, I quite like her character. I think I sympathise quite a lot. And of course, she has that great passage in the appendix to the story, where she's telling her daughter about how men are just sort of use women for their for their physical needs and then toss them aside, which is quite a powerful little passage, I thought.
Yeah.
If you read that bit, I don't know, did you? If you had a look,
I did. Yeah. I'm trying to find it here.
For me, it's on page 266, but it could be different if you have a Houghton Mifflin edition. The page numbers could be different.
Yeah, I think I have different pages, but yeah, I found it here. I'm not going to read it, but
sure.
I quite liked Erendis, and I got the sense that Tolkien liked her as well. I kind of got I can't remember which parts of the Bible there's some theories that they were written that it was written by a woman. I think possibly the mother of King Solomon, I think.
Oh wow. I don't know about that.
Yeah, the literary critic Harold Bloom, I think he calls her J. He calls like the author J.
Yeah.
And it's been a while since I've sort of read up on this, but there are certain books in the Bible, including the in Genesis, the first part is a sort of cosmic creation, and then the second part is you have an anthropomorphized God, walking through, literally molding Adam out of the earth. So I believe the scholarship goes that the Jay, the woman, wrote that second part as opposed to the cosmic one, because it's a more personal story. And in all these in these other stories, there's always a level of not satire, but maybe sort of like a sardonic wink at the actions of men, which are also in the Bible, as in Aldarion and Erendis, presented as noble and necessary and all that stuff, and yet in this extraordinarily subtle way that you really if you're just sort of glossing over it, you can miss, I think. But I think the prose is actually quite not super critical of it, but kind of rolling its eyes at it. I don't know if that makes any sense. And in that sense, it seems to be like a lot of the passages, actually seem to be almost written in the voice of Erendis, even even if not literally so. I'm sorry to be reading so much, because I know I suck at reading out loud, but
great.
But there's this. I thought it was quite funny. Like, it's among the last lines of the actual thing before the sort of appendix. But Aldarion says, it is far below my hope of her. She has dwindled, and if I have wrought this, then black is my blame. But do the large shrink in adversity? This was not the way, not even in hate or revenge. She should have demanded that a great house be prepared for her, called for a queen's escort, and come back to Armenelos with her beauty adorned royally, with the star on her brow. Then well nigh all the isle of Numenor she might have bewitched to her part and made me seem madman and churl. That seems almost to be written by Erendis, kind of saying, a big kind of fuck you to Aldarion at the end there.
Yeah, quite a bit of bitterness by the end, for those who haven't read the story. Although, as I've mentioned before, really you need to have read the story to probably understand what we're talking about here. But I that's a great passage. Yeah, just trying to find where she. But trying to find the section where she talks to her daughter. But yes, at any rate, Erendis is a sympathetically drawn character, and I think what's interesting also that I don't hear remarked on very much is that, just as we saw in The Children of Hurin, which ends, of course, with suicides. Sorry to spoil that if anyone. We see here that it seems that Erendis, the story would have ended with sort of Erendis sort of lost and forgotten, even by her own daughter, right? And then she would have sort of walked into the sea, Virginia Woolf-like, or, she walked into a river, whatever, and sort of, So we see another story where Tolkien is sort of dispensing with that very moralistic sort of take on things that the Lord of the Rings gives Gandalf, as I mentioned in the Children of Hurin episode, Gandalf sort of going about to Denethor and sort of saying, well, you have no right to take your own life, blah, blah, blah. There's none of that here. It's, again, much more sort of character-driven, in that sort of wider sense. I don't know if you got that sense as well, but
that's an interesting point. I didn't think about it in so many words, but I agree with that. It definitely it seems much more human scale again. I think I've sort of used that comparison before, or used that kind of metric of analysis. But yeah, it seems very like ground level, like you said, character driven, rather than any sort of grand ethics that's driving the decisions.
Yeah, for sure.
And I thought with Erendis, the way that the way that she is sort of she it almost seems like she is painted as a kind of a wood nymph or something, like she's almost a spirit of the forest. I think she even goes to, she says somewhere that what is the name, the name of the sea goddess or spirit? It's like something.
Uinen,
Uinen, yeah. She says somewhere that that she is her enemy or her rival or her something like that. Yeah, she seems to sort of personify the exactly what Erendis is tearing down, right? I think it's a lovely sort of anthropomorphizing, where you see Aldarion, going a sea to sort of tear down the timber to sort of build his fleet and whatnot, and it's doing real harm to his relationship with Erendis for obvious reasons, but also while because she's portrayed as this person who sort of loves every tree in the forest and can't bear to see them chopped down, and it gets, the prose gets to a point where I almost kind of identify her with the forest and the trees. Then there's a sort of metaphor there where he's doing sort of literal violence to her, as I guess people is fashionable to say these days. I don't know if you got that vibe at all.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, she is identified increasingly with the forest, although even there she comes to resent that and ends up in the sheep pastures, because that's the only place that sort of Aldarion hasn't somehow corrupted by his by his industry or his as she would see it.
Yeah.
So, or by his economic, I don't know how to, his use of forests or the sea or whatever for economic purposes, which she seems to, that's what she seems to have a problem with. It's this, she wants to sort of stride amongst the old growth forest. Of course, again, reading Lord of the Rings, of course, this is a huge theme in the book, in the Lord of the Rings, and the sort of the sort of conflict between having to use the environment for economic purposes, or and then also having to defend it against sort of depredation, and where does the balance sit? Where does it lie? And I don't know. I don't think the Lord of the Rings has like a clear sort of answer to that, but this story presents sort of another exploration of that idea. Again, as I've said before, particularly through that, particularly by linking sort of that exploitation with imperialism and asking about how that sort of works.
Yeah, is it really true that in the Lord of the Rings, he's kind of ambiguous about it? Because my sense is that in Lord of the Rings, he's actually pretty clearly on the side, on the side of the trees or whatever, it seems like in, yeah.
Well, yeah, he is, but then it's fairly clear that also it's not only the orcs who, cut down trees. It's it's the humans, it's the hobbits, it's the and the forests themselves aren't always benign. There's also this sense of sort of, the old forest is sort of this semi-malicious place. So, yeah, I don't know. I think there's a little bit more ambiguity than simply forests, nature, good,
industry bad.
I mean,
fair enough.
I guess what's so rancorous about Saruman, who is the kind of most obvious, sort of example in the Lord of the Rings, is that his use of the forest is economic, but also kind of it's wanton destruction as well for its own sake. But But there is an ambiguity there, right? It's like, well, if Saruman cuts down the forests, okay, we have the Ents, we're going to go fight Saruman. But it's not just Saruman cutting down forests; it's also hobbits. It's also, and it's also said like that the Ents. Well, the Ents are going to fade out of memory, and they're all going to die off, and that sort of, there's an inevitability to that. So there's this sense that once Aragorn is the king, all of that sort of, that enchanted forest kind of thing is going to sort of disappear, and we're not going to have that anymore, right? Forests are just forests. We cut them down for trees. So I don't know. There is a bit of a weird sort of ambiguity there, I think.
Fair enough. Yeah, but I thought it was, it's obviously quite distilled in this story because it's so short, and and it seems much more of a practical look at it, because I don't know, what are your thoughts on Aldarion's imperialism, whatever his sort of resource gathering? Do you think ultimately that was a good choice, or is it pretty obviously that
it's hard to say, because I mean, in the context of the book, I don't know, he's on the one hand, it's true that this enables the Númenóreans later to sort of come to Middle-earth and defeat Sauron, but at the same time, as I've said, it sort of produces this situation where, by the end of the Second Age, you have these two slave empires fighting it out, for who's going to control Middle-earth. So, I don't know, the ethical situation there is certainly not very clear. It's not simply the case that, Aldarion and the Númenóreans are sort of paragons of virtue and goodness, and Sauron, I guess Sauron is, by this time fairly depredacious, but certainly the Númenóreans become that as well. So I think within the context of just this story, it's clearly the case that sort of I don't know, like imperial ambition does to an extent corrupt Aldarion, not necessarily like into becoming sort of a horrible person or anything himself, but into becoming obsessed and sort of distracted by that, right? And so in the context of the smaller sort of boundaries of this story, his relationships are never repaired. There's a moral cost, right? That there's a cost to his obsession. So I don't know if that's what the story is meaning to suggest, but it certainly does to me, I suppose. Yeah. And I like that you sort of bring up the idea of moral cost, because I think the story kind of deals with that in a pretty grown up way, I think. To the point that there's even a sense that evil is not an island. Evil, it does have causes, and sometimes legitimate ones. Even though it is in its response obviously sort of blown out of proportion. But I think it seems to be, going back to what we were talking about way back. It seems to sort of deal more in a grown up way than other things, maybe, about the sort of the trade offs of politics. I don't know who is it that says that in life there are no solutions, there are only trade offs. This really has sort of distilled that into a story. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And this is probably the story that I wish he'd finished the most, because I think it would have had this tragic ending, and I think had it seems like his plan for it was to go to the next generation, perhaps, and then and Calumet would have been more of a character, and her sort of whatever. So it's an interesting story, but it's one I wish he had worked on enough to finish, but oh well. I guess we work with what we have.
Yeah.
So
there's a charm to it too,
Yeah, there is, and as we've said,
with all unfinished works.
That's true. Yeah, and I think the editorial job does a lovely. The editing does a lovely job of sort of rounding the circle, if you like, and we see how the story might have ended, sort of befittingly tragic, as I said, sort of with Erendis walking into the sea. It's a sort of it's sad in its own way, but it also prefigures the conflict to come in a sort of personal sense between these characters. So I think it's a fascinating little piece.
Yeah.
And of course it deals with deals with relationships, and even to an extent there are, for Tolkien, much more explicit, quasi-sexual references. So there's even allusion to that much more forthrightly than there is in Lord of the Rings. Although Children of Húrin has that too. It's not so out of character in the Silmarillion material. But I don't know if you picked up on that, but yeah.
Totally. I'm trying to. I was kind of spotty about underlining here, so it makes it hard to find things in a jiffy. But do you have any thoughts on the sort of relationship dynamics between Aldarion and Erendis? In terms of how they're sort of painted and just like, what are your thoughts on them as an item?
Well, I mean, I'm convinced by their courtship, but of course, I think as you've mentioned, he does a nice job of sort of really painting that gradual bitterness and resentment as it grows over time, especially on Erendis' behalf. I feel like Aldarion is just aloof a lot of the time, and then finally sort of starts to feel his own bitterness at the end. But especially on the part of Erendis, and you really, I think, feel that, which is why it's powerful. And you sort of mentioned before that there's a sense that you can sort of come to inhabit her thoughts and her point of view. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said. I think it's funny that there seem to be a few lines where Aldarion is really sort of portrayed as a almost like a kind of childish jock or something. He's very he's like I have one line underlined here that I've just happened on, but it's kind of hilarious. He says, "Smiths may smithy and horsemen ride and miners delve when they're betrothed," said he. "Therefore, why may not mariners sail?" It's like, dude.
Yeah.
What are you smoking? And can I have some?
Yeah, I wish I could use that as an excuse.
I think you've sort of talked about their long. Is it courtship? Is it technically courtship? The whole period that they're sort of
betrothal, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know what the technical term is. But it really draws on, and Aldarion seems to be the only one that doesn't mind. He just is. So the way that the story is structured, you don't actually know what he's up to until pretty much the very end, right? I think
that's right. Yeah.
That we should have said that, but so that adds like another interesting dynamic to it, because for most of the story, you're reading this, and I think Tolkien obviously wants you to think this. Aldarion seems like the most selfish, self-centered asshole around.
Yeah.
there really is no, at least, I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to be picking up on subtext that I didn't, but it largely just seems like he's obsessed with his hobby.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
To the detriment of all of his relationships, like every single one of them. And then at the end, it's like, oh, okay, maybe he had some like important worldly political cause for this thing. But that doesn't really excuse him. It doesn't really excuse his behaviors.
That's not all he did, because he did. That's not all he's doing, of course, because he is, of course, also, as we've talked about already, he is also setting up the port. He's also sort of, engaging in some of that more dubious imperialistic behavior.
Right.
That certainly still seems to be part of it, even if we grant that, okay, yes, he's, preparing an alliance against Sauron that will come to fruition later. But as I've said, even that has a sort of dubious or uncertain dimension to it, because it becomes something more than that. It becomes something much more aggressive than simply a sort of an alliance to defeat Sauron. Or whatever.
Yeah. Right. So, yeah, I don't know. I just think that's interesting. That
yeah, for sure.
Again, going back to what I was saying, it seems like Tolkien is pretty even-handed on them both, but but maybe there's a slight sort of, as I'm thinking about it more, I might sort of correct that and say that maybe the story is actually kind of reflexively disdainful of Aldarion, because for like 98% of it, you're reading this thing and it is really Erendis's tragedy. She's essentially with a man who's never around.
Yeah, that's right.
And is leading her. He leads her on for. I actually lost track of how long. It was over 10 years, right? That they were between the courting and the engagement period. And I guess they live long lives, but still,
they do live long lives. But
but it's ridiculous. He leads her on. He leads her on forever. I guess he's
the ultimate leader on, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Slash kind of ghosting. Sometimes
he's just like a self-centered bro, really. He's like every sort of 20-year-old dude.
Yes,
you can think about. It seems like Tolkien kind of leans into that, and you don't really get hip to the sort of larger agenda till the end, and even then it's kind of meek. Like you said, it's kind of a sort of weak excuse, and even what he's up to is kind of dubious anyway. So I don't know. It's interesting. It really. I wouldn't go so far as to say that Erendis is like a strong female character, but
she is in her own way, right? She's just a normal. She behaves like a believable person. At least I think. In that sense, she's a strong character. In the sense that she's given sort of all the agency of a human being in the story, but she's certainly not. Actually,
you're right. I stand corrected on that. Like at the end when she turns down Aldarion. That when as I was reading it, that was kind of a remarkable moment, because I was gearing up for I was kind of gearing up for the classic happy ending, like the father like forgives him because he was actually doing politics this whole time, and he's gonna get the throne, like his dad's back on his side, he's gonna get the girl, it's gonna be fine, and then Erendis just says I'm sorry, but you can go fuck yourself. So that's true.
No, it is not a happy ending at all. So I don't know. It's very much like Children of Húrin in some sense. These people sort of battered by their decisions and by their strong personalities all around.
Yeah.
But yeah, gosh, it's interesting. Well,
I had a question real quick. If we're not going on too long. Is there any connection to the kind of, when we were talking about the children of Huron and of Turin in particular, the sort of northern kind of temperament. Is there any element of that? Because right off the bat, there's this line about Aldarion. He grew swiftly to a man of great stature, strong and vigorous in mind and body, golden haired as his mother, ready to mirth and generous, but prouder than his father, and ever more bent on his own will. From the first, he loved the sea, and his mind was turned to the craft of shipbuilding. I don't know, and he seems very, very sort of brash, again, self-centered. I don't know. What do you think about
there are
that?
certainly similarities with Turin there. I think in terms of his character, definitely. Pardon me. To be quite frank, I like Turin more than I like Aldarion.
Yeah.
Because Turin's motivated by different things, and I don't know. But Aldarion, I don't know. He does. I don't know. Maybe there's a sense of that northern heroic sort of brash character there, but I don't think he's motivated by quite the same ideas here. I think Aldarion is more of, as you say, kind of a bro. I don't know. he's motivated more by not greed. It's not quite the right thing to say, but definitely. And I think it changes over time. Obviously, we've talked about his sea longing, but then he also develops this interest in, I suppose, the political, right? The situation in Middle Earth, whatever. And again, we don't find out much about that, but that's obviously where his interest goes. And in some sense, that's that's what Erendis is talking about when she does the speech and sort of says that men in Numenor turn their play into great matters and great matters into play, and blah, blah, blah. All things were made for their service. Hills are for quarries, rivers to furnish waters, or to turn wheels, trees for boards, women for their bodies' need, or if fair to adorn the table and hearth, children to be teased when nothing else is to do, but they would as soon play with their hounds whelps. To all they are gracious and kind, merry as larks the morning, if the sun shines, for they are never wrathful if they can avoid it. Men should be gay. Yes, they should. They hold generous as the rich, giving away what they do not need. What did she say that though? Anger they should show only when they become aware suddenly that there are other wills in the world beside their own. So then they will be as ruthless as the sea wind, if anything dare to withstand them. That it is Encalime, and we cannot alter it. For men fashioned Numenor, men, those heroes of old that they sing of their women we hear less, save that they wept when their men were slain. So, it's interesting. I almost feel like Tolkien is criticizing some of his own stories there, because we literally hear about like women weeping when their men were slain in like the First Age stories. Yeah. So, there's definitely an awareness again of the sort of
Yeah. No. Again, it seems like I was saying, like a story written by the. It seems like a story written by a female pretending to be male in a time when you couldn't just outright say these men are being foolish. So instead she does it much more subtly and with satire, with great irony. There's a line here when Erendis is talking to her mother, and her mother is sort of disapproving of the way that she's feeling, and she says, the mother says, quote, where is it? A woman must share her husband's love with his work and the fire of his spirit, or make him a thing not lovable, which is a wonderful line and sort of driven with irony, because of course at this point Aldarion is anything but lovable already. He doesn't need any help from Erendis. Thank you very much.
Yep.
It's quite sensitive. It's quite sensitively written, and it seems, if you just read one level below the text itself, it seems sort of just full of reflexive disdain for the bros and their goings on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, so it's a fascinating little piece. Well, I think I think again, this is one we can come back to again one time at some stage. Yeah, I think we've had a good discussion there about some of the ideas in the text and the characters. Was there anything, I don't know, final you felt like you wanted to say about the story before we draw this to a close? Or
I think I pretty much covered most of my thoughts. I didn't really have anything organized, so I can't say if I've forgotten anything.
No, that's cool. Yeah. I guess all I would say is if you haven't read it, for those who may be listening, go and read it. It's in Unfinished Tales. It rewards reading, I think, and rereading and considering in light of some of the other works that we've talked about. And so thanks for listening. And again, we've got that Patreon if anyone wants to help us out so I can get a better mic. It's a Tolkien reading pod.
That's a great pitch. That's a great pitch right there, man. If you're tired of hearing the shitty audio quality on this, go subscribe to my Patreon. We're gonna hold your ears hostage.
I'm doing my best, but yeah, it's no. Like the one I've got at the moment is perhaps not the greatest, but
no, I'm just giving you a hard time.
That's all right. But so as I say, we've got a couple of interviews coming up this and next month, and then we haven't quite decided what we will look at next, but it'll be something interesting, no doubt, and so we'll see you there. So was there anything final you wanted to say, Sridhar, to our illustrious listeners?
Be well, and again, I hope I haven't pissed off too many actual Tolkien people who are listening.
I'm sure we're fine. I think that was a pretty good discussion. And I didn't get any negative feedback about the Hobbits, so I think people are fine.
Awesome.
All right. Later.
Peace out.